Hey, how's it going everyone? In today's video I'm going to teach you how to create and style button components in React. Now we're going to create three different buttons. The first one we're going to style using just regular CSS. The second one we're going to use Bootstrap for it. And the third one we're going to use styled components. As always, my name is Norbert and I teach web development on my channel. So if you want to learn more, then please subscribe. And also click that notification bell in order to get notified whenever I post new videos. So if you're excited for the video, please leave me a like and also share it with others. Sharing means caring. Now with this being said, I'm going to remove my face and let's get started with our video. Okay, so I just created a React application, called it button components. Now we can npm start. By the way, if you don't know how to install React, it's pretty simple. I also have videos on this on my channel, so please check them out. Okay, so we had a React application. This is just a basic React application. And you know what? I'm going to make this a bit smaller. You don't need it this large. And I'm also going to make my editor, my code editor. Let's resize it just like that. Perfect. So we're going to create, as I said, three button components. First one is going to be using just regular styles. So we're going to start with how to create a component. Now let's just make a bit of management, a bit of cleanup here. We don't need that app tests, logo. Wish we do need the logo. Shall I leave it in there? Yeah, we can leave it in there. We don't need setup. We don't need report, test app. I'm going to delete them. This is going to break, no problem. We're going to go into index and we're going to remove this report. Let's remove this one. You know what? I'm going to also close my terminal. We don't need our terminal right now, and remove this one. Hit save, and now React app is working. Okay, first things first, we're going to create a new folder in our source. So click on source, new folder. Let's call this components. Components, missing an N there. Within our components, we're going to create using right click, new file, and let's call this button.js. Within here, we're going to create and export a new function called button. So you can use our abbreviation RFCE, which is going to create a React functional export component. So let's hit enter, and there we go. There's our function, and it's exported down here. Now we're going to replace this div with a button tag, and that is almost it. We have now created a component. In order to use this component, we're going to go into app, to our app.js right here, and we can now import it by typing in import and then button, and we're going to import it from /components, and from here we're going to import our button. Okay, now in order to use this, so we have it imported. In order to use it, we're just going to go down here. So you know what, we can remove this link, and we can remove this paragraph tag, leave it in there. We're going to, if you want, leave this in here. Now right after the header, you can go right in here and type in, so use a less than sign, then type in button, then close it here, and close and a greater than sign. So as soon as I hit save, you'll see down here is the button. That's not what I want. You know what? Let's move it into the header. So cut it out from there and move it in here. There we go. There's our little button. Now that we have our button, let's also style it. Now let's go into our app CSS file, and you can basically leave everything that is in here just like it is. And let's grab onto the tag of button. Now I'm pretty sure that you already know CSS, so we're going to go ahead and just do a basic styling. We're going to set our cursor to pointer, our display as inline block. Let's increase the font weight to 600. Now we can give it a text align to the center, then a white space of no wrap, a vertical alignment of middle, a user select of none. This will basically prevent us from tabbing through it. You can leave this disabled. If you don't want to use this set as none, then you can just comment it out, and then you can basically tab through buttons. Okay, now you could change this border. Basically, you could say that border 1 pixel solid and transparent, or you could just give it a border, and this will override the border none. As you wish, you can comment out the above one and comment this one back in. As you wish. You will see later on you can change the borders. Next up, let's give it a padding. So I'm going to give it a padding from top and bottom of 0.375 rem, and then left and right 0.75 RAM. Now the font size we're going to set to 1 RAM, and the line height we're going to set to 1.5. Okay, now let's also change the border radius a bit. Let's just say 0.25 RAM. It's going to take down the edges just a bit to have a more modern look for the button. And now the last thing that I would suggest to do is let's give it a box shadow. So box shadow and 0, 0, 2 pixels, 1 pixel. You can obviously increase this if you wish. And RGBA, and I'm using RGBA because I want to be able, I'm going to zero through out of this. So I'm going to have a complete back color and 0.3. So I'm just going to have a bit of a shadow here. And you will see if I change, let's also change the background color of this. So app header, background color, let's go with the hash of FFF. Let's do here white color. Okay, there we go. And we have our shadow there. If I would take out the shadow, so let's comment this one out, then it would have no shadow. Okay, now we have a button. We have a basic styling for the button. But now let's say that we want to have different kinds of button. So I could grab onto our button tag and let's give it a class of pink. So if the button has a class of pink, then the background color should be I'm just going to use a pink color here. So E83, E again, and 8C. And now for the color, I'm going to use a white color. So basically the text should be white. So how can we use this class on this button? Well, we could go ahead and go into a button component. Wait a second, we don't need the index. Close basically this one up. We go into a button and assign it a class right here. So class name, and let's say class name will be pink. And basically the button will turn pink. What good is this component if we want to reuse it and we always will have the same class of pink? So basically if I would go ahead and copy this button again, I will have two pink classes, and that's not what I want. What I want is to be able to control how my button looks. So for this, we can use props. Basically, within the class name, instead of typing in pink, I could just use color and pass this color within here as a prop, as a property of this button. So if I go back into my application, and for the first button, if I call upon the property of the prop of color, I can now pass in pink, and there should be a string. You also would not need the curly brackets here. Okay, so my first button has the class of pink, and this is why it now also has the color of white and the background color of pink. So what about the text? Can I change the text? Yes, you can. You go back into a button, and instead of button, you would change this to text and pass it up here, comma, text. And now I would have a text property on my button. So text for this button should be, let's say, CSS. And for the next button, I could use a text add. Now I could go ahead and let's say I want to have some kind of hover effect on the button. Now we can do this using CSS. Just go in here, back to our CSS, grab onto our button. If we hover, I don't need L button. If we hover over our button, then let's say the button will have the opacity of 0.9. Let's hit save, and if I hover over my button, then it's going to have a bit of opacity. Now let's add another class to our button. Let's say our button, if it has a class of pill, then the border radius will be 15 pixels. Okay, so let's go ahead, go into our app, and let's add to this button the class of pill. And now we recognize that this right here, this color, adds actually a class. So how about we change this color property to another property? Because we're actually defining not only the color, but what is all of the properties of this button. So let's change this to type. So I'm going to select both of them using Control D. I'm going to change this property to type. Go back into our app, change this also to type. And now I'm going to go to my second button and tell this that the type should be, okay. Now I can still add to this button. And you know what? I'm going to go back to CSS. And let's say that the button, if it has the class of LG, not log, LG just, then the padding of the button will transform to 0.5 RAM. So 0.5 RAM, top and bottom, and 1.2 RAM, left and right. So let's add this class of LG. I'm going to go back to our app, and where I have the pill class, I'm going to hit space and LG. So basically I can add multiple classes. If I would take these two classes and copy them in right to my pin class, then this would also turn into a button with a class of pill and LG. Now let's add a very last property to our buttons, which will be when the button is pressed, and for this we're going to use active. Then the button should transform and decrease its scale to 0.98. Okay, and let's also, don't need the 0, just 0.98, and let's also remove the box shadow. So box shadow, and let's set it to none. So we can now have a click effect on the button. If I click the button, you will see it to decrease its size, and also the shadow will be removed. Okay, so this is one way of styling buttons. Another way of styling a button would be by using a CSS framework, like for example Bootstrap. Now Bootstrap works basically by using classes. If you're not familiar with Bootstrap, it kind of does the same thing that I did here, but you won't use the class in CSS, you will just type in the class name. So let's first of all link up Bootstrap to our project. In order to do this, you go to bootstrap.com, click on Get Started, and we're just going to use the CDN, which is right here, so the CSS link, copy it, take the entire link, copy it, then go back to your project, go to public, and within your index file, index.html file, you just need to paste it. Well, you can almost paste it wherever you wish in your title. You can actually delete this and delete this. And above the head, above the title, I'm just going to paste it in here. Okay, let's also type in a comment of Bootstrap CDN. Now the entire code will be in the description below, so you can just download it if you get lost. Now let's go back to our app. Let's grab onto another button component. Actually, I could just take and copy this one. Let's go back to our project. And instead of the text of add, I'm going to use here the text of Bootstrap. And for the type, I'm going to use now Bootstrap classes. So this button will be a btn. This is a basic Bootstrap class. This is telling the button then that it will have the class of a button, and then a btn-primary. And now this button takes up all of the classes from Bootstrap. Now we could create a completely separate component for this button, and just in order to have a bit more exercise with creating components, let's go ahead, go back into a component, create a new file. We're going to call this btn.js. Again, I'm going to use rfce to create a component. This time I'm going to again change this to button, but for the class name, I'm going to use something different. I'm going to use, instead of a string, backticks. So we're going to use template literals, because we have here a pretty cool property, and that is using variables within strings. And this will help us do the following thing. Instead of having here btn primary, I know that all of my buttons do have the btn class. If you take a look in Bootstrap, just quickly go up here, search for button. If you go to the button component, you will see all of the buttons have the class of btn, then btn primary, btn secondary, btn success, btn danger, so far and so on. So when I want to use this type of styling, I want to simplify things by already having these two classes into my button. Also, I want to be able to change the type of the button from a button type, for example, to a submit button when I'm using it in a form. So let's go ahead. Let's go to btn component. First of all, let's give this a type. And right here, we're going to change this to type. Give it the prop of type. I'm going to pass the prop of type up here. Now for the class, let's go in here. Let's open and close curly brackets. And now I'm going to open up backticks. And first things first, I'm going to create within here a btn. Then after that, I'm going to type in btn hyphen. And now I'm going to use $, open and close curly brackets. And now I'm going to pass in here btn type. Okay. Now let's also pass it up here, comma, btn type. And the last thing that we need is text. And again, here, let's pass in text. So let's go ahead and use this component now. Let's go into our app. Let's import it first of all. So import btn component, btn. We're going to import it from dot one level up components / and btn. So I can go down here and use my component less than, then btn, close, and close this one up. So we said that the type of this will be a button. Now the btn type, actually I could use color here. Let's rename this to color. Let's go back into btn. Let's say btn. Let's actually select this. Let's name this to color. And let's also change this one to color. Go back into our app, change this one to color. And now I can set this to, let's say, success, which is basically a green color. You know what? This isn't correct. I should have here a string. And now for the text, I'm going to set this to boost. Let's say success. Okay, now let's take a look in our application. There we go. There's our button. I can easily change this to example dark or danger or info. Now if you would inspect this, so let's right click inspect and select the button. So I'm going to select this button right here. I can also see that the type is button. Okay, if I change it to success, not success, submit, then we can see that the type is now submit. Okay, so easy as that. Now I could use this in a form and this button would submit the form. Now if you want to type in here multiple classes, use different classes, for example pill, or if we go down in our button documentation, you'll see that you have tons of classes. You could use btn outline primary. So let's use this one, btn outline primary. So I just have to copy this outline primary, and let me also go to our application and paste it in here, and I will get now an outline primary. You could change this to danger, and basically this will also change it because it already has this btn abbreviation up here. Okay, next up, let's use style components. Now if you go to styled-components.com, you can check out the documentation, read through this if you want. Let's go very quickly to documentation and installation. You'll see that using npm you can install styles, and you also have to install style components in order to use them. So let's open up the terminal, Control tilde or Command tilde, depending on Mac or Windows, whatever operating system you're using. I'm going to open up a new command line, a new Z shell, and within here npm I, you can also use I as an abbreviation, -- save and styled -components. Okay, let's press enter. This will now install style components into our project. And after this is finished, I can just go back. I can actually close up this. Now we can use style components. Now let's go to our app and let's just take a couple of seconds and talk about style components. The way style components work is you will be able to use CSS exactly as you type in here, CSS, so we'll see this, and a couple of Sass properties within a React file. So within a JavaScript file actually, or a JSX file. Now the way style components work is that they're actually using template strings in order to let us type regular CSS. So within our components, I'm going to create a new folder called styles. So right click, new folder, and styles. Within here, I'm going to create a new file called button style. Button.style and .js. Now I'm not going to use a function to export, but I'm going to use a variable to export this. So let's export a const called styled button. And this I'm going to set to styled, and as you can see, React is for now not recognizing this. But so let me just delete this and go above our export and import styled from styled components. So let's import styled from styled-components. Okay, now I can set this to styled dot. Now basically I'm telling this, which is important from style component, to style a HTML element. And the element that I'm going to be And the element that I'm going to add to be styled will be a button. Now right after the button, I can open and close backticks. I'm going to move this one down, and now I can type regular CSS. Don't believe me? Take a look. I can now use, for example, background dash color. Let's set this just to red. Okay. So how can I use this in a component? First of all, let's create another component. Let's go into components, new file, and let's call this one as BTN, basically for styled. Let's say ST button. We can call it whatever we want. So .js. Now you remember that you exported here this style button. Now we need to import it here into our STS-BTN. So import, but now I need to use curly brackets because we're not importing a function, we are importing a variable. So we're going to import this from, and we're going to import it from .style and styles and / button.style. Now because this is a component, I'm going to use rfce, export it. And now I'm going to, instead of this div, use the styled button. Okay? Because as you can remember, if you go back to our button styles, let me actually close everything else up so you won't be confused. I'm going to leave app.js open, button styles and stbtn. So in our button.style.js, we are exporting this styled button as styled of a button tag. So basically when I'm importing and replacing this with styled button, I'm actually importing button tag, which is styled. So a button, a HTML button, which already has style associated to it. Don't believe me? Normally this button always should have a red background color. So let's use this stbn. Let's go into our app. I'm actually just going to import it up here. Import stbm, and let's use it down here. stbm, close it up, and close it up, and there we go. As you can see, it created a new button with a red background color. Now let's extend on this and create here some styling, which we actually could just copy from here, our generic styling. Let's copy this, paste it into our button.style.js. So if I paste this, everything in here, well, the button looks like a regular button, but I could now create a class for it. So let's say that I want to create a class just as I have here in my button.pink, this pink class again. Or let's create an orange class. In order to add a class to a style component, we need to target its parent, because we cannot say here button and dot class, button dot and whatever class, let's say orange. And let's just add here background dash color, and we're going to add here the color, a hexadecimal color of FD7E14. Let's close this up, and a color of, you know what, I'm going to leave this as a dark color, so this. So if I want to use this class, I need to go up to my component, and let's say class name and orange. Now why isn't this working? Because we cannot target this button like this. We need to use its parent selector. And the parent selector, if you ever used SAS, for example, or SCSS, it's the end % sign. And if I save this, now I'm targeting the parent, which is the button. So this basically means exactly like this button, but instead of this, we're using the parent control. And this means button dot class of orange, and now it has the class of orange, or the background class of this color and the black text. Don't believe me? Let's create another one. Let's say, just copy this. Let's change this to indigo. And I'm going to just copy and paste in here another color, which is hexadecimal color 6610F2. And then the text color will be white. So let's change the class. Let's go into our button and change the class to indigo. And there we go. We have an indigo color, which is violet. I don't know, lila and whatever. And yeah, the color of the text is now white. Now we could go further and use here, instead of indigo, because this is the component itself, we can now use type or use props. Let's say this is going to be type, I'm going to pass this up here as type, and we're going to go in our app, the CSS, in our app, and there's the app. There's the app. Take the component, type in type, and say this is going to be the type of indigo. Okay, I could create another button, and this should be orange. Now I'm going to also copy in the rest of the CSS, which is LG, active, hover, so far and so on. Let's go ahead, go into the button down here, just basically just copy and replace each time there's a button and do this. So if I hover them, they are going to have a opacity of 0.9, and also if I click on them, they're going to remove the shadow and also decrease their size, so scale 0.95. Let's change this to 0.9, and it's going to be much smaller. Now you could expand this, also add text property to it, not in the style, but within here in the class. Let's just quickly add here text, and it's also here add a text, and then pass it up here. Let's say text indigo, and I'm going to copy this, paste it down here, and orange. Okay, that's basically it for creating and styling button components. So hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you're not already subscribed, then please consider subscribing to the channel and clicking that notification bell in order to get notified whenever I post a new video. If you have any kind of questions or suggestions, please leave them in the comment section below. As always, the entire code is downloadable in the video description. And with this being said, catch you next time. Take care. Bye bye.